Good morning. Welcome, everyone, and I'm so excited that you've joined us. I'm Kim Brooks. I'm the Dean at the Faculty of Management, and you're here having a coffee with us while we talk about the promise of diversity in management. Let me begin by centering us in place. Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, and we're all treaty people, and that's like such an important part of the conversation that we're about to dive into. I'm going to give each of the four extraordinary panelists we have a bit longer to introduce themselves than we might normally. Normally, I might say, this is X person from Y place, but we want to root ourselves, I think, in who we are, what we're bringing to this conversation. So let me start by asking Angie to tell you a little bit about herself.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Angie Gillis. I am the Associate Executive Director at the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq. I come from Eskasoni First Nation in Cape Breton. I moved to Halifax in 2000 to pursue my dreams of becoming a lawyer. So I attended Dal, where I completed both my degrees, finishing law school and being called to the bar in 2010. Since then, I've been working with the Confederacy, essentially providing services and programs to 8 Mi'kmaq communities in Nova Scotia. I also sit on Dalhousie's Board of Governors, Natural Resource Canada's Departmental Audit Committee. I sit on the Nova Scotia Ministers Forestry Advisory Committee, as well as a number of other boards to do just this, to help affect change and create more diverse workplaces, programming, and really try to help our communities move forward. Now, the most important part of my life, of course, is my family. I am the mother of 3 beautiful girls, and I've been married to my wife for 12 years. So I have had the experience since, I guess, starting my career of both or being a woman, a gay woman, and a Mi'kmaq woman trying to really make a career for herself while also helping those coming and following in the paths behind me also progress in their careers. Thank you.
Awesome. Angie, you didn't mention that you're part of the advisory board for the
Faculty of Management.
The Faculty of Management.
Yes.
I'm so lucky.
Sorry.
All right.
I had it too. And I was going to mention it, and I was just like, oh, lost my train of thought.
All right, very good. It was a long list, so I can see why you might forget it. All right, I'll ask Fiona to come and say a few words so that we get to know you, Fiona.
Fiona Nitisifigason. My name is Fiona. Danse Ekwa Genanaskomatin. Awawa means hello, I'm deeply grateful to you in Woodland Cree. I'm deeply grateful for this opportunity to be here today in beautiful Jabukduk, Halifax, on Mi'kmaq territory. I also want to acknowledge that Deloitte has 52 offices across Canada, and that they reside on traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories as part of Turtle Island, and is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. I am the National Advisor, kā-nīkānīt, which is a Woodland Cree word. It means the lead man or the one in front. But my grandfather was a hunter, fisher, trapper, and he would have called his lead sled dog kā-nīkānīt. That would have been a name he would have called. So I'm the lead sled dog with Deloitte Indigenous, Deloitte Canada. I started with Deloitte about 5 years ago, almost exactly 5 years ago. I started out leading the Atlantic region's marketing practice, and I have a 40-year career in media, private and public sectors, mostly in communications and marketing roles. I was also self-employed as a graphic designer. I'm a very proud Nehidao Isquiyu, meaning a Woodland Cree woman, from the Lac La Ronge First Nation in Treaty 6, Northern Saskatchewan. My spirit name is Standing Elk, Kanibuwit Nosi Wawaskisu, of the Eagle Clan. I'm also the granddaughter of a residential school survivor, 11 years. She went to residential school. Daughter of a day school survivor, and I too went to 2 day schools myself. I am the first female chair of the North American Indigenous Games. The games were to happen, of course, this last summer, but stay tuned. We will be announcing more in the not too distant future about when the next games will be held in Jabukduk. I believe it's important for me to state these things about my background. So like Angie said, that people who come after me can see that they have a place in corporate Canada, that they can see themselves in a leadership role, and that they can be proud to bring their full selves to work, which I think is what diversity and inclusion is really all about. And I want people to realize that who they are is exactly what our workplaces need. And as we are speaking about the promise of diversity in management, I want to just quickly touch on that this wasn't always the case, surprise, surprise, in many places I've already worked. Don't get me wrong, my previous places of employment all have their strong points, but I can't say I felt completely safe to come out as Indigenous, as a white presenting person. Whenever I did say Cree, I was peppered with the most inappropriate questions. I used to think it was just curiosity, but my gosh, people wanting to discuss, to start discussions about how much tax I must be paying or not, or how much Cree I am, because I don't necessarily look it at first blush. I usually just chalked it up to a lack of education and not malicious intent, but still, I think it did not do anything to help me feel welcome or included, and I certainly didn't see leadership being very diverse. So whenever I went job hunting, like many people I know who are racialized, I was often reluctant to tick that box, the one that says, do I belong to a minority group? And it's really makes me feel emotional to talk about that now, because I am proud of who I am, but I sometimes would hide. Not anymore, but that's a reality for many people. I want to just quickly also say that what it's like to work for an organization that is focused on diversity and inclusion, and I will say that Deloitte isn't perfect, but I have to say, since my first day, I felt valued for who I am. And as a quick example, in 2018, I first presented, actually it was 2017 when I first presented the idea of reconciliation, of acknowledging the land that we stand on, of dedicating a space to the memory of residential school survivors and educating people about Indigenous history and issues and all the positive things too. It was embraced, and it was the beginning of a journey that we've been on ever since around reconciliation. And since then, the firm has been establishing other such spaces across the country. So Halifax, Jabukduk had the very first legacy space in support of the Downey Wenjack Legacy Fund. I can tell you, as the granddaughter of a residential school survivor, words can't express how much this moved me and helped me feel included. So it is deeply meaningful to be part of an organization. So while not perfect, it is certainly on a journey. It's a place that is, I feel there is a strong commitment to diversity and that it's authentic and inclusion. So when you truly work for an organization, I should say, that truly values your voice, is open to change, commits to your growth as a leader, it earns your loyalty and trust. So last spring, despite the disruption of this pandemic, the firm decided to place a priority on reconciliation and on building meaningful relationships with Indigenous peoples. And as a result, I now have a dream job where I help lead our Indigenous marketplace strategy across this land, and am champion of our newly released Reconciliation Action Plan. And it was the first of its kind in corporate Canada, and it is our answer to the Truth and Reconciliation's call to action number 92. So, really, as it turned out, simply being me has led to the best career move of my life, and I guess it doesn't get much more meaningful than that. So with that, I'll say awalalan denege. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. That's first, what an incredible path. And I'm so grateful for the hard work you've been doing, certainly for my part, as we're having conversations in the faculty about the way forward for us. I've spent quite a bit of time using your report as a touchstone on the kinds of things we should be thinking about, and I appreciate that. And as somebody who teaches tax, I'm so grateful that you made that comment, because that was the theme of our course this week, was a conversation about the myths that we have about taxation of Indigenous peoples in this country and the many challenges that need to be rectified. So thanks. Let me turn the panel over to Matthew.
Hey everyone, thank you so much, Kim, and thank you, Dalhousie, for putting on this panel. I think it's really great, and it shows that you're truly a champion in the community. So my name is Matthew Martel. I grew up in a small town in Cape Breton, then moved up here to Halifax to go to Dalhousie. I joined the TYP program, which was extremely eye-opening for me to just have an opportunity to be part of a program and community that had people that looked like me and shared similar experiences and challenges. And really it was the experience that I'd been looking for a really long time. So currently in my job, I'm the CEO at BBI. I sit on the Halifax International Airport Authority Board, as well as the Acadia Institute for Data Analytics Advisory Board, Downtown Halifax Business Commission, and the Halifax Dance Board. So lots of board work on the go, and I see a lot of really great initiatives here in the city and in the province as a whole. So excited about a lot of the things that we have on the go. When I talk about TYP, it kind of takes me back to what I constantly am searching for when I look for new projects and look for new employment. It's really that ability to impact community, be connected to people who are similar to myself, and through BBI we get to support Black businesses, we get to give them training, mentorship, help them make connections to really help their businesses succeed. And then on our businesses jam inside, we also have an opportunity to impact Black youth, giving them professional development opportunities, seeing them start at one place and through the years and just keeping close to them, seeing how many significant things that they're doing in the community is really great for me. So really looking forward to this panel and some of the folks that are on it. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, Matthew. I'm excited to have you here. I've only had a chance to share a Zoom space with you with a bunch of other people in conversation about some of the really neat things BBI is doing in response to, for example, some of the opportunities coming out of the federal government and so on. So maybe that'll be part of the conversation along the way, but I appreciate you joining in this morning.
Absolutely, thanks.
Rodney.
Oh, hello, how are you all doing? Humbled to be here today, and as many other people echoed, thank you all for putting on this important event. For me, this is very close to home. I am born and raised right here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I like to specifically point out where I was raised. I was raised in the north end of Halifax. It's very important to me because I grew up in a very tight-knit community, the community of the UniX Square. It's an African Nova Scotian community, and similar to Fiona, I like to point out that history because when we talk about our history as African Nova Scotians, we're talking about 450 years on this land. That's called experience, baby. And when we talk about experience, that's very important to our culture because when we're talking about 450 years, we have to think about the longevity, whereas Canada is only 150 years old. That makes us indigenous to this land. What's also really important is I also hold Métis status. So many of us who are African Nova Scotian also hold Métis status, but are just learning about this part of our history, which was taken away from us throughout the years of oppression that we felt and we experienced on this land, living here for the last 450 years. So to have these types of events, it's very important in order to address some of the systematic issues we know that are alive and well today as we speak. They're not gone. So to have these type of events is extremely important. I also like to say, similar to Angie, I am a father. I am a father of seven children. They are very dear and close to my heart, obviously. So I'm also a mentor, a coach, entrepreneur, community builder, and change maker, to say the least. But the funny thing is, a lot of people know me by my initials, and that's RDS. And the reason being is because I was a part of a very famous case, which happens to be the leading case when we talk about the apprehensions of bias. This case was fought by one of my mentors, and I always like to point him out, as he's no longer here on this earth with us, but he is definitely here within spirit, because he stays close to my heart, that's for sure. And that's the late great Bernally Rocky Jones, who would have been responsible for programs such as the transition year program that Mr. Martel mentioned, along with the IB&M initiative, which is the Indigenous Black and Mi'kmaq initiative, which Angie also mentioned. He was a very key component to bringing these programs on campus and putting them in place to address some of the systematic issues that we have been dealing with over the years. And as you will see, some of those programs are panning out just well, because they are producing the likes of the Matthew Martels and the Angie Gillises. So it's great to sit on a panel with both of them, that's for sure. I myself am a QEH alumni. I like to point that out because my school's no longer there. When I say QEH, Queen Elizabeth High, it's now it's a flatland, but we'll see what it will be over the next however many years. But neither here nor there. I graduated from Dalhousie in 2015, the School of Management, and I did my internship at BBI, Business is Jamming. And I was fortunate enough to actually win Internship of the Year due to the work I was doing in community to promote entrepreneurship amongst African Nova Scotians. So over the last 7 years, I've actually been working in the social sector directly in my community. So I work directly in the African Nova Scotian community, and my story come full circle because I actually have been working out of the building that I met the late great Bernally Rocky Jones, and still doing some of that same legwork that I know he's started. So I'm honored to stand on the shoulders of all those who've come before me, because I know that this work is work that many people have taken on before myself. And when I talk about this work, I'm talking about that advocacy and that fight for equity, that fight for equity. So thank you for having me today. I'm humbled to be here with all the other panel guests, and I look forward to the phenomenal conversation that we're about to have today.
Awesome. Thank you, Rodney. So we sort of share that experience with Rocky Jones. When I first got here to Halifax, I spent a bit of time with Rocky, and I think it's really fair to say I got well schooled by Rocky. So who knew, you know what I mean, that there was indeed such a gap in the things that I needed to know about, and he was taken far too soon, because I'm sure that, you know, my educational path would have been quite a bit richer had he been with us. And if you ever miss him, there's a beautiful portrait of him in the Weldon building across the street from us, and so walk over there and take a look. All right, let's dive in. Let me ask a first question, and I'll ask this to everyone, and for people who are watching at home, our goal here is to have a dynamic conversation. So we've got a starting question, and then we're going to use it and incorporate some of the questions that might come in from you, as well as respond to each other through the course of the next 40 minutes or so. So let's start with a kind of level setting question. What does diversity and inclusion mean to you? And what do you think is the promise of diversity in management? And anyone who feels like they're ready to jump in first can get us kicked off, but I'd like to hear from all four of you on that question.
Okay. Happy to jump in. To me, the promise is that diversity and inclusion are the norm. That's the vision. That's the norm. Mm-hmm. And that these are workplaces created by leaders that establish a welcoming environment where differences are celebrated, where leadership focuses on growing the strengths of their people, regardless of ability, regardless of race, color, background, anything. And that they're building organizations that are truly courageous, they're creative, they're forward-thinking, because they're constructed of people with different backgrounds, skill sets, and mindsets. I could go on. I live in a utopia world, I think, in my head, but I love that question, because we need to have that vision so that we can get there. And I know it's easy to get pulled back to the past, to circumstances that we would rather not think about, and some of that is reality, but I see the shift. We are moving there. So that's the promise in my mind.
And if I can just build on Fiona's point, I absolutely agree. And I think for me too, that promise is something that has to extend throughout the organization. So I think a lot of times we see organizations start either where it's easy or most manageable, but really I think a promise for diversity in management has to be at the board level, has to be at the front lines, has to be mid-managers. Really, it has to extend out. That's something I think is extremely important to mention.
And I'll piggyback on that, because where I come from, promises are made to be broken. And many of you probably heard that before. So neither here nor there. I like to say when we talk about diversity and inclusion, I like to sum it up very simply by saying actions speak louder than words. So going back to what Matthew was saying moments ago, and we have to ensure to make sure that these promises are not broken. We have to make sure organizations are taking the necessary actions to show that that first and foremost, your environment is completely inclusive all the way around, just like Matthew said. And my experience was a little bit different than Matthew's, because when I went to Dalhousie, there were very few people that looked like me. I didn't take the transition year route because that didn't pan out for me, neither here nor there. So I went in the front door, and I can promise to tell you, based on my experience, that I never seen any faculty that looked like me. I never seen very few people that looked like me. Even the students were rare. In fact, the students that did look like me never came from Canada in many cases, nor even get a little closer to home, were not African Nova Scotian. So neither here nor there. I'll sum it up by saying actions speak louder than words.
Yeah. I too, I can second that as well. Being a Dal student, I remember coming in, that first year. I came with, there's about 5 or 6 of us from Cape Breton that had come up from Eskasoni, and by the end of the first year, we were, 4 of them had moved home, and I had decided to kind of stick it out, and it was not just the loss of our community, but also just that sense of not fitting in to the mold. And I would see this again and again, including when I was finally called to the bar, and you get your first jobs, and you go in and you think you've done everything that is expected of the institutions to be able to be successful in them. And then you walk through the doors and you see that there's nobody who can speak your history. There's nobody who can speak your truth. And it was then I decided myself to go back, because there was still work to do, and that my passion, my dream was always to become a lawyer. But what I learned very early on in my career was that the passion was actually to really do something to affect change in my community, to help them progress. And seeing what institutions I was working in at the time were like, I knew that I couldn't do that there, that there was a mold that just couldn't be broken. But if I could go back and work for my people, that maybe there I could find a path where I could try to crack that mold. And those molds can be broken. I think we've seen it. We've seen it in the last year. There's a lot of old school way of thinking. I can tell you, we were forced. A lot of these old school institutions were forced to shut down and find a new way of working. And was it out of need? Yes, but I think it was also out of want. It was out of want to protect ourselves. It was out of want to prohibit the spread of a pandemic. It was out of want to keep our loved ones safe. And it was a unified want here in Nova Scotia. And I think that's why we are doing so well. So yes, need, but also want, because because of what it meant and what it stood for. And I think we need that when it comes to diversity and inclusion. I think we all need to want to affect that change. We all need to want to create a new understanding that's integrated with my understanding, your understanding, all of our understandings, versus one understanding of the way things should be.
Thanks, Angie. So let me take that as a starting place for the next question, which is quite a few of the sort of level setting comments that each of you made were about the need for it to be a thick commitment. So something that's held by leaders, but also by everybody else in different organizations, the kind of commitment to have our organizations be fully representative and inclusive and places where we see ourselves in each other. Maybe let me start by asking first about what you think are some of the unique responsibilities that leaders or those in power have to make sure that there's change within their institutions. We'll start there, and then maybe I'll ask you a sort of second question about what the rest of us should all be doing as well. I mean, how we make sure that we change our institutions in the way that we all know they need to be changed.
Well, I'll start. I think, when we talk about those leaders, we're talking about positional power. So when we talk about power, we have to understand the difference between power and influence, because you can have power without influence, but you can't have influence without power. And I always like to put that out there for some of the people who are on the lower end of the spectrums, because when we most of the time operate from a hierarchy. And going back to some of the things that Angie was saying, if we can create a culture that is demanding our leaders to create fully diverse and inclusive spaces, then all of a sudden, whether they're elected officials, because in many of these cases, we already know that's where these type of leader positions come from when we live in a democratic society, and I put that in quotations purposely. So they're in a position of power where they can really alleviate that down the chain to create more of a learning environment, so that ultimately that is reflected within the organization and amongst the culture.
I love his passion. Oh my God.
That's the Holy Spirit. Don't mix it up with passion.
I love it.
Actually, that's a really good point.
Please
Passion.
don't mix up the Holy Spirit with passion.
Okay.
Passion in some lights in the word, and I'm very close to the word. And when I say the word, my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, can be mixed up as a sin. So I want to put that out there. Yes, all this stuff is very close to home, but more than anything, it's the Holy Spirit that is within me that comes out and expresses it in that manner.
Amen.
Yeah. So maybe if I can, I think absolutely, Rodney, always great, sitting alongside you and hearing your words. And I think that, for me, it's also important for managers and people in power, especially as Rodney mentioned, positional power, to make changes, where you can with what you have. Because a lot of times, I'll sit on not-for-profit boards and maybe they, have done one thing for a really long time and they're trying to make the shift. And sometimes it, can feel like this overwhelming challenge, but really it's important to look at the realities of your organization. Where can you do something really well that you're proud of?
Mm-hmm.
Start there. And one thing that I think everyone can do that I always encourage people to do is to be a sponsor for someone. We hear sponsorship versus mentorship all the time. And it's easy to be a mentor for someone, but I think sponsoring someone is really important. So what are you saying about people when they're not in the room? What are you saying to people that you're close to? And is there something that you can do to help hoist someone up who, is extremely high potential or very talented that is in your network? Because I can say for myself, every single opportunity that I have in my life has been someone sponsoring me in one way or the other, whether it's personal life, professional life, someone seeing something in you and, having those conversations when you're not around. And I think that's extremely important to the community.
Mm-hmm. I love this. I think, how can managers or how can management support change? I guess based on my own experience, what I think is really effective as well is being really transparent about where you are and where you want to go. So if you're not there, it's okay to say, you know what, we're not there. We are not there. We need to do better. And then you listen. You listen and elevate your people. You listen and get to know them deeply. You start through that, you start to learn how you're going to support them by removing the barriers, by removing the physical, emotional, psychosocial, cultural barriers as best you can, so that they do feel empowered and included. And I think that's really, really up to leadership to do that. And up to leadership also to hire more leaders, either if they're from outside coming in, or find those people within your organization that you can elevate. We really need to be very deliberate, very intentional about that. Can't just wait for it to happen. And make it public. There's nothing more than no better accountability than to put your plans out there and make them public. Don't keep them to yourselves. It's like people saying, "Oh, I want to lose 20 pounds." If you tell people you're going to do it, well, you're probably more likely to do it. The same thing with your efforts around diversity and inclusion. Be public, be prepared to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah. And just going off of something Rodney said too about action, right? Action. And I mean, realistically, how hard is it to look at your workplace as a leader and take account? Well, who do you have in your workplace? How many diverse individuals do you have working for you? And if it is below 50%, then that in and of itself should tell you there should be a shift. Because one thing we don't do is we don't hold ourselves accountable to the numbers. And we think sensitivity training, we think talking about it, educating about it is enough, and it isn't. Well, I had a conversation yesterday, and one thing that we were talking about is how the interconnectedness of what diversity and inclusion has with changing your workplace culture. And by changing your workplace culture, you're in turn influencing your management structure, because you have to respond to the needs of your employees. So if you start at creating a more diverse workplace, then there's going to be a natural progression there, and we are going to see some changes. But we can't just talk about it. It goes back to Rodney. You have to take action. You have to take account of who's working for you and try to make change.
So Angie, let me try to build from that and see if I can. I'm in an office with an automatic light. Do you know what I mean? Jump it out. See if I can. I've been too still. You've been too gripping. See if I can ask a question to sort of build from that. We've talked a little bit about diversity in the sense of representativeness, but of course that's a preliminary step to, I think, what we're probably really aiming for, which is the change piece of things. And so can I ask you or others on the panel to spend a bit of time talking about, what do we see when we get a more diverse and inclusive organization? What are the changes that we would hope to see as a result of that?
Oh, how long do you have?
Give us a highlight or two, Fiona, and then
I'm going to do really quickly, because this is a big topic. I want to get to the nut of this from a business standpoint, and I will shout out to my colleagues at Deloitte who have done the research regarding inclusive leadership and how inclusive leadership can make a huge difference in an organization, and it, essentially, how a team member feels that's inclusion, right? They say that diversity is in being invited to the party, and inclusion is being Invited to dance, right, Rodney? So 17% of people who are on teams who rate their leader as inclusive, they're more likely to be higher performing. They are 20% more likely to make high quality decisions. That only stands to reason. And 29% more likely to be collaborative. So this is this is as a result of 5 years of study. There's a lot more data, and you can Google it on our website. Just go on our website. All kinds of stuff around inclusion and leadership and diversity and accessibility. I want to just quick mention about persons with disability. We actually have a new accessibility report just came out last week, and it's about our own commitment to making Deloitte a more accessible workplace. I think that's critically important as well. We have a lot of intersectionality with racialized and disabled as well. So I wanted to quickly mention that. But that's what I have to say on the topic of inclusive leadership.
Thanks, Fiona. I have another question on cue, but does anyone else on the panel want to jump in on that one before I ask it?
No, I think Fiona pretty much covered it. I think it's, it's really about being specific and making sure that you have leaders in those positions. So I think she pretty much covered it for sure.
Okay, so let me jump in now and switch a bit and ask you to think a little bit about our emerging leaders. And a couple of you identified this in your opening comments, which is, when we look at the data about our student diversity, there is just an incredible gap around Black and Indigenous students, and especially around Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian students. That is just a persistent gap in the student diversity numbers at least our Faculty of Management. But we have some extraordinary students who come from those communities and are emerging leaders. And so, do you have advice or thoughts that you would offer to them as people who have found yourself on that path as well?
Find your courage.
Yeah.
Be courageous.
I think too, it's, it is that it's being courageous, but also being strong. One thing I learned early on was there's going to be decisions made that are not your decisions, but those decisions that are made for you, you can keep control of that because it's going to be your path. And a decision that may really hurt you in the moment is going to set you on a path that you may not think that, or you never thought you would actually end up on. And it's going to take you to a place where you belong, where you fit. So there's going to be bumps. And every time there's a bump, just know that that's a crossroad for you. And you get to choose which path to go down from there. But you have a purpose. And that at the end of that path, you're going to find your purpose. And you're going to do great things. So don't get down on yourself when those decisions are made for you. Find your own path and you'll get there. So that would be my advice. And I was lucky to get that advice. And when I got it, I was like, what are you talking about? But then I realized it was true. And I ended up somewhere where I never thought I was going to end up. And I absolutely love it. I love it. And it's going to be different for everyone, but you're all going to find it. So don't get discouraged and don't give up. Be strong.
As Fiona was saying, it's so funny. Every morning, like clockwork, when I wake up, it's a morning ritual. I say the serenity prayer. God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's how I start my day, because it's really important to keep me grounded and humble. So my advice would be to stay humble, stay grounded. And one of our late greats would say, we like to keep it simple, keep it smooth, and keep it moving. And then I would sum it up by saying what my grandparents would say to me quite often. God gave us 2 ears and 2 eyes, And that's to listen twice, to listen and watch twice as much as we talk. Okay?
Yeah.
And that gives us the ability in this day and age to stay woke. And as Indigenous and Black leaders, I can promise to tell you, you're best to stay woke, because if you don't stay woke, they're going to pull the wool over your eyes once again. History has shown us that.
Yeah, stay woke and stand your ground. You know, I think you remember that, like it or not, maybe, that you are a role model. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but you are showing what's possible. And so in doing that, you're creating space for more. And that's critically important. I don't think I got that until just a few years ago. And now I do. And I'm very passionate about that.
And many of our Black leaders, they don't have that positional power. But what we do have is what we call influential power. Hence the reason why I said to you earlier, we can have power without influence, but we cannot have influence without power.
So maybe I'll ask for a couple questions from the folks who are watching. I think we have a question here about small businesses. So as a small business, how do we ensure there are the right pathways to management roles? It kind of feels like it's for you, Matthew, I gotta say.
I suppose I could go first. Yeah, so I think really great question. One project that we're working on at BBI is called the Diversity Employment Network, and really we're helping organizations solve this exact problem. And we have lots of other community projects as well. I know we have the Youth Employment Lab, all those types of projects. So I think for me, one of my biggest questions when I speak with organizations or leaders within an organization is first, is it in the mission, vision, and operational plans? Because if it's not, I think we're already aware that maybe it's not as serious to your larger organization as you think it is. So it's extremely important that it finds its way there. And because ultimately we also know that there's always the saying, what gets measured gets done. So you never want to be ticking boxes, but I think it's extremely important that performance evaluations, all of the things that we're looking at internally in that organization need to be tied to that goal, if that's a serious goal of the organization. And if you're someone that maybe is feeling completely lost on the topic, one, connect with community organizations, or look at an organization who you believe is doing it well and connect with them and see what they've done to just get some insight and maybe get some best practice and share experiences. And of course, always, you can certainly reach out to organizations like BBI, and we'd love to help you wherever we can. But that's where I'd start it, without knowing the specific organization. That's what I'd say.
So thanks, Matthew. I know we've got another question. Ready to go on. Here we go. So as an employee, how do you balance the desire to advance your own career with the desire and need to hold space for diverse people to join your organization?
Privilege is real. Privilege is real. And guess what? We have to be willing to alleviate it. Simple.
That's a big, Jennifer has the courage to actually ask the question. I think that's actually something that I think a lot of people think about. And I appreciate that question. I don't know that I have the answer other than you can do both. It's not an either or.
Yeah.
I think there is room. I think we just have to shift our thinking about that. You can still go for it. You could still, everyone's entitled if you have the work ethic and so on, but, reach out. And I want to talk about allyship if we can get to that as well, because that's going to be an important part of how we all move forward. I think that's a very good question, Jennifer. And I think that you can do both. I think you can still do both. It doesn't have to be You're advancing your career. It doesn't have to be at the expense of someone else. But just remember, privilege is real. Privilege isn't, in my mind, isn't something we throw at people as a weapon to remind them that they have it. But sometimes people have to be reminded. It's certain people in positions of power. I think there is room for everyone. I really do. We just have to be deliberate about creating diverse and inclusive workplaces. That's all there is to it. We're not saying, all white people need to step aside. That's not the point.
And I think what happens when we start to alleviate power, what we'll see is that our careers will start advancing, because that's the reciprocal effect. When you put those type of energies out into the world, I can promise to tell you the spirits will speak back to you and in that same type of energy. It does not die, it only transforms. So when you're willing to alleviate your positional power and your privilege to make room and space for someone else, I can promise to tell you that will reflect in the most predominant way possible.
Abundance begets abundance.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
So Fiona, you mentioned something about speaking to allies, and I want to turn to take a final question from folks watching. So I'm going to talk to this question from Kanta, but then I'm going to turn and pick up the ally theme as we come towards the end of the hour. So let me ask this question: why are persons with disabilities excluded from the diversity agenda? I can open that up for folks from the panel. It's a question I've done some agonizing about myself, so I can jump in if that's helpful. But let me see if you have thoughts about it first.
I wanted to quickly address, I touched on this before, like what Deloitte did with its Reconciliation Action Plan. It's something I'm extremely proud of. I'm equally proud of the new plan that we have launched called Building an Accessible Future. It's actually on our website if anybody wants to look at it and potentially use it as a model or not, but do read it. It is about creating an accessible workplace for those who are physically disabled, who are intellectually different, neuro differences, and so on. We built some specific targets, plans on how to create this more inclusive workplace specifically for those individuals. So in our mind, I think we recognize that perhaps we had a gap in this area and have decided to address it. And as I mentioned earlier, doing it publicly. So we hold ourselves accountable. This is important. And so in our mind, it is equally important. If we really think about it, disability touches every one of us almost. There's someone close to us who is disabled. We may have had our own disabilities, some of them hidden. I've had some in my life, and permanent and temporary. I feel that this is something going to be more critically important going forward. We have to consider also older workers. I'm approaching that myself at almost 59 years old, but we are. Thank you, Rodney. But there's a lot we have to think about there. So it's a really good point, and I think it's important to keep this in our awareness. So thank you for the question, Kanta.
I will be reaching out after, Fiona. I need to know what you're eating.
You too, Rodney. 7 children.
But neither here nor there. I really appreciate those comments, and I think without having those visible disabilities, it's even harder to understand where maybe this question is actually coming from. But being out and engaged in the community, this was one that caught my attention, and I'm glad it came up. Was working in the community to engage African Nova Scotians, and lo and behold, we had an African Nova Scotian in a wheelchair. She said, "Imagine what life is for me," because people don't even see the wheelchair, that disability first. The first thing they see is the color of her skin. Like she said, I'm in an uphill battle because I have to battle 2 disabilities. And I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
So I can see that the backstage folks who are awesome at this are not accepting my suggestion that I shift to ally question to sort of cap us off, and they want us to deal with this one, which makes lots of sense. So thanks for the question, and here it is. How can we as young leaders advocate for ourselves to continue moving up while also dealing with imposter syndrome and fear of being tokenized? Like, what a great question. So let me throw it out there for you.
Great question. First of all, I think all of us deal with imposter syndrome at some point or other, so don't fear that. That's okay. Push forward anyway, and know that you deserve to be where you are. You're there for a reason, right? You're there for a reason. So just, let that one go as quickly as you can. And I've had to learn that the hard way. Tokenized, that's important. It's very easy. I can say that I am one of the, if not the only Indigenous person in Atlantic Canada working at Deloitte. And I'm proud to be in the role I am. I'm not even Mi'kmaq. I'm not from here. So don't worry, we are working on that, and we do have people coming in very soon. We have some hires happening because of, we're awake to this. This is critically important because I think so often as the Indigenous person, I can get asked, for my perspective on everything about Indigenous. And just so you know, not all Indigenous people are the same. We're very diverse. Angie and I were talking about this before we started.
Yeah.
We're very diverse. So I do not speak for anybody else but myself. I don't even speak for all Woodland Cree. I speak for me as an Indigenous person. But yeah, being tokenized is a real issue. So how do you advocate for yourself? Encourage people to educate themselves, encourage people to be allies and truly understand what it is to stand beside you. And sometimes it's going to mean no one's going to open the door for you. Sometimes you're going to have to bust it down yourself. It's just how it is. Hopefully this next generation will have less of a hard time than my generation and certainly the generations before.
So, Matthew, I'm thinking I want to hear you, Matthew. I ain't heard you. I know you.
Rodney, that's my job. You're going to be the moderator for the next one, Rodney. I'm stepping out.
So it's funny. I feel like every opportunity that comes, and I think it's a cultural thing. I think it comes with being a minority, but most of the opportunities, if not all of the opportunities that have come my way, there's severe feelings of imposter syndrome. Yesterday, having a conversation with a team member, they were expressing a feeling of imposter syndrome. So it's so common. And I think really the only thing that I've been able to do to work on overcoming that is to, have those honest conversations with people. They often will share the exact same feeling and say, you know what, I still feel like an imposter. I'm in retirement. I still feel that, and recognize that's growth, that's development, and that's something that's going to come your way. And then for the tokenization part, really my own advice on that is to find organizations where that's not the case. Don't sit at tables where the question about how to engage a community, all 10 people turn to look at you for an answer. I'm sure it's happened to everyone here on the call, but those are the tables that, you don't want to be at. You want to be at the tables where, it's an inclusive conversation. Everyone is saying how they're feeling regardless of, where they're at. Obviously, there's going to be different levels of understanding, some lived experience, some unlived experience. So really, I think it's about being authentic, sharing that you feel that imposter syndrome, and I guess create that avenue for others to share as well.
See, I told you, didn't I tell you he had something good to say?
Always.
No, I'm telling you, I could smell it. I could really smell it. It was even right through the screen. Right through the screen. But I even like to add, just do not let anyone devalue you. Do not let anyone devalue. Know your worth. Know your worth. And last but not least, stand your ground. This is something I'm dealing with as we speak. I've experienced this over the last however many weeks. And neither here nor there, we have to be sure to call out the blind spots. Let's have the tough conversations, which ultimately will lead to growth.
Angie, I'm going to shift to thank our audience and panel, but I want to give you a chance to jump in either on this question or on the question of allyship, or to offer us a kind of a last word or two from you, and then I'll say thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more to add to the last question. I mean, I think we've all experienced it. There's been many boards, committees where I myself have felt just like the token Indigenous rep or Mi'kmaq rep, and you know, you're able to tell. You're able to tell very quickly who has you there because they value your input, because they value who you are and what you bring to the table, versus those who have you there just to have you there, to just check that box off and say, we've got an Indigenous representation on this board. So you have to, I mean, you're gonna have both, and you're gonna be able to tell very quickly which ones that you should really kind of continue to participate in, and which ones to walk away from. And just because you're walking away from the ones that don't value you, I mean, do you really want to progress your career on boards and committees like that anyway? So as Rodney said, know your worth, know you have a lot to offer, and focus on those.
So let me thank you as such a distinguished and fascinating panel. I have just so appreciated your insights. It both makes me like really excited about what's possible, and also sort of exhausted thinking about how much there is to do from here to there. So both of those things are true. I sure hope that as a faculty, we're able to take up the challenge that you've laid down today. And I'm excited to have these conversations and continue them with you and my colleagues. As a small piece of what's motivated this conversation for us has been our effort to respond to that gap that we saw in our student numbers around Indigenous and Black students, and again, especially Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian students. And so we've built out a program, the Promise Scholars Initiative, where we're trying to support bringing in more students from Indigenous and Black backgrounds, and offer them, you know, something that's a little bit more considered than the kind of standard scholarship, where we're trying to think about these issues around sponsorship and how we truly make room for people in our communities and support them on their paths. So they put up a notice for it, of course, so if people want to learn more, it's there. And we're having a range of conversations around Dalhousie University that build from some of the conversations we've had here. And so we encourage people that have come to attend today and others to join in on some of the many activities at Dalhousie that kind of continue this conversation in different forms and different ways. Let me thank you so much. I've learned a lot, even in this hour. I feel like we could do this for days, you know what I mean? And then I would be even just feeling both more excited and then probably daunted and tired. So I appreciate your energy and enthusiasm, and I look forward to hearing from you and others. Thank you especially to the backstage crew who has made this possible, and to our intrepid interpreter, Karina, who always does such a spectacular job. Have a great rest of the morning, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.